some of your listeners are probably, okay, wait a minute. Evangelical pastor, now you're a Democrat. Like, when you hear that first part of my life story, I was very much in right-wing politics because that's what you had to be in my career field. You had to be. I actually worked in a church that told me you couldn't be a Democrat and a Christian. And
that's not true.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so this is the second episode of Symposium, and today I'm interviewing Michigan House District Representative Joanna Whaley.
Candidate, yeah, not quite in the House yet, but we're working on it. Yeah.
So I was reading up on you is very interesting. I would say that you have a very remarkable story from you've come from. You faced a lot of discrimination in areas, and you've managed to overcome challenges. And it's been nice to see people like that who are overcoming stuff. Like, I'm someone who has autism spectrum disorder, so I can relate to overcoming the challenges like that. And it's really like rewarding to see that. I had heard that you were like a spiritual care provider. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, about your experiences.
Yeah, well, some of my background comes from where I was in my career. I was a pastor for 20 years of my life, pretty much right out of high school. I got hired by this big, huge church, like thousands of people every week, started pastoral counseling, people that were way older than me. I was kind of learning, from the ground up with no educational training in pastoral leadership. Fast forward in my life, I ended up outside of the church, went back to school, went back to seminary, and got my seminary degree, and fell in love with clinical chaplaincy, which basically, my day job is entering into some of people's worst moments of life. I do spiritual care in emergency rooms, ICUs. I go into people's homes at end of life. These are the things that I deal with every day. If you can think of the moments in life where people are at their most vulnerable and making some of the biggest decisions of their lives, whether they're going to live or die, I'm in the room for those decisions. But it's one of the greatest honors of my life to be able to do that and to spiritually counsel people through those moments. And I get to do that as a day job.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. And to see you be able to impact people and to see how you've been impacting people, it's great to see that, and I'm happy you're doing that. Now I'm gonna move on to talking about policy because a lot of your policies I wanted to focus on were healthcare related.
Yeah.
Mainly because I wrote a book on it, a political allegory called Black Cross, which is finished. It's on Wattpad.
Awesome, I will be reading that.
I had some bouts with the medical system where it was hard to get stuff approved because of the type of disability I had and other stuff related to that. And I noticed you're all about fair insurance policies and really holding them accountable. I'm really curious how you plan on going about that in the modern day and age, because I do think this is a pressing issue in our modern times.
Yeah, we are heading towards a cliff in our healthcare system right now. The way things have worked for, the last 100 years in our healthcare system is not going to work in the next 100. Because what's happening right now, especially in today's America, is it's no longer right versus left. It's the billionaires and the corporations versus the rest of us at this point. And what's happening is all these hospital systems are consolidating. So your choice of caregivers and providers is becoming more and more limited. And the resources that they're taking up from all of us, the consumers, the patients, is becoming more and more scarce, right? Because we're having a hard time making it. We're having a hard time covering our premiums. Our deductibles are getting higher and higher each and every year because insurance companies are wanting to pay out less and less while their CEOs are floating on yachts, right? This is what we're dealing with right now. And the healthcare needs of our generation and the boomer generation that is getting ready to need a lot of specialized care, our healthcare system can't keep up with it the way it is. And so I look at my generation. I'm a millennial. Millennials are having a hard time getting ahead. Uh, you know, we're living with our parents at a higher rate than any generation in history. And Gen Z is looking at where the world is going when it comes to AI, when it comes to, what is the prospects of the job market out there? Corporations are paying less and there's less jobs out there, so it's harder to get. So how are we going to be guaranteed health care if it's only provided by having a job, right? Or going on a marketplace where you have to pay money that you don't have in the first place. And this is the healthcare crisis we're going to run into in the next 100 years. So my solution, and many in the Democratic Party are fighting for what's called MiCare for all. Now, on the state level, I don't have the power to implement MiCare for all. There are candidates. There are folks like Bernie Sanders, in our U.S. Senate, who backs MiCare for all, is trying to push that into the commonplace. But what we need to do is, if the federal government can't make it happen, the federal government cannot make a healthcare system that you are guaranteed as a U.S. citizen, we need to do something in the state of Michigan. So I'm backing what's called the MiCare plan, which is a single-payer healthcare program here in the state of Michigan. If you are a citizen of Michigan for more than 6 months, if you're born here and lived here your whole life, you automatically have healthcare. You don't even need an insurance card. You have it as a citizen of the state of Michigan. And there are no copays, no deductibles, and there's only one healthcare payment coming from the MiCare plan to your provider. You don't have to pay a dime for it anymore, and you don't have to pay to go see your doctor when you need it. That's the healthcare system we need moving forward.
I will have to say this. I love the direction, like parts of the direction that you want to go. However, I think the biggest issue we have right now, because of how bloated and bureaucratic our government already is government spending. And a lot of it is because we pay 24% in like Social Security and Medicaid, which was a program Richard Nixon started in the 70s. So I'm not going to say that encouraging like people to have a job is like a terrible thing. Like, it could be paid for. Like, corporations should have the responsibility to pay their employees health care. That should be like a federal thing that's passed. But I also feel that like maybe we need to go on the path of like, we need to make it a more centralized solution, but we need to make sure that it doesn't overinflate our economy, because we're already in a crisis, right? Like, we're spending money on stuff. Like, look at what's going on in even Iran. We're spending money on that.
Yeah,
we don't
exactly.
know where all that money is going.
We're spending $1 billion a day dropping bombs on children and hospitals across the world. We could be spending that money on our own hospitals, on our own children, right? That's that. When people say, "How are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that?" It's very simple. I found the money. It's being dropped in a bomb every single day across the country, across the world, right? Our federal tax dollars, our state tax dollars are going to fund that machine. And with what myself and many others in the government are trying to say is, we simply have the money, we are just not using it properly. You want to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse? It is waste, fraud, and abuse to take my hard-earned tax dollars and drop a bomb on a child across the world, right? And so I would rather spend that on giving my child health care, making sure my child has insulin at the end of every month, right? And so what we're talking about is not how do we pay for it, it's about where do we adjust the funds from? Where do we move the funds from? The funding is there. And so that's what I'm proposing. And, you know, I Rep. Carrie Reingens, who's the author of the bill, is who I'll be supporting in that program. And there's a lot of things to work out, right? You're right. We want to make sure that, we're a lot of things Republicans say. You know, we don't want to create what they call a welfare state, right? Well, first and foremost, like, you know, many people who have health insurance aren't using it. Why? Because they're afraid of the copay. I have health insurance, and I'm scared to death to go to the emergency room because I don't know how much the bill is going to be, right? So I'm just paying this corporation month after month after month for what? To not use it, right? Just to make them more rich. So I would rather my tax dollars go into a system that is funding the good of the entire state of Michigan rather than the good of a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a HAP.
I would have to say that, like, one of the major problems I've had with it, and I'm sure maybe you've had with it, is like that like it's not a very paid attention to thing. Like back in the day, like even if you go back as far as ancient Egypt, right? They used to compensate their workers with all this stuff: beer, money,
Sounds
time
great.
off, like all this stuff. But they would work long hours. But
Yeah.
these were like steel workers or like people who worked on pyramids, and they would build stuff out of sandstone, just like modern like people build like skyscrapers or buildings. And now they're getting less treatment than they did 1,500 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like to figure out where we go wrong and where we can go right is important here. And I do feel like it needs to be like a centralized solution, and it needs to be less state and city involved, because then corruption kind of comes from that. This is more of a personal view, but that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I like that you have like an idea for it, and it's nice to see that you're working towards something like that, which is awesome that people are addressing this issue, especially in the modern day, because I feel like it's not being talked about enough.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we look at our current healthcare system, right? And you talk about corruption. You want to know what the most corrupt system is really our healthcare system. They're taking our hard-earned money out of every one of my paychecks, and they're putting it towards massive amounts of bureaucratic and administrative costs. The administrative cost of a Medicare for All option is about 2 to 3%, where your Blue Cross plan is somewhere between like 10 to 20%, right? You're talking about, it's a massive reduction in the waste and the corrupt use of that money. And so for us, I think that it is the smartest option to stop corruption. I look at corruption, I look at enriching executives off of my hard-earned money is the most corrupt thing we could be doing when it comes to life-saving care, right? You talk about having troubles with the system. A corporation made that hard on you, right? It made it hard on all of us. I have a child with a lifelong illness, and we have to navigate the cost of that, right? Somebody in a boardroom is setting the price on what my child's life is worth, and that's wrong. That is corrupt as all can be. So what we want to do is, again, like you're saying, we want to make sure it's a centralized, fair system that values human life rather than profit.
And I feel like with the problem, like I've always thought this, the government is like one big business, just as like a corporation is, but it's like one of the biggest businesses in the entire world, where to manage it, like it definitely needs to be updated. There's definitely systems that are archaic, but like this whole like promise, I can even go like to what Doge was supposed to be. I feel like we expand funds like that, but it's just adding another institution to solve problems of billions of other institutions. Like, to fix a problem like that, I feel like it's imperative that we think about stuff very carefully and we put contingencies in place so that it doesn't become overly bureaucratic, but so that it's a sustainable system for all people.
Right. And that's where we need politicians who are going to adhere to norms, right? You look at Doge, you look at what's going on in the federal government right now, there's so much chaos because we have given up on the promise and the hope of having institutions that are apolitical, right? And that's what this healthcare system would need to be. It would need to be an apolitical system that is not subject to political interference, no matter who's in power, right? And many Democrats are the ones pushing this, Medicare for All option forward, but we don't want it to be a democratic program. We want it to be a program like, I don't care if people like me because of it. I just want them to have health care. And that's and you're right. So we've got to make sure that we keep the political corruption out of these systems, and make sure that we protect them by law.
And like I think back then, like I'll go back to use historical examples because I love history. I could go on about it all day.
Yeah.
But I like to go on about like FDR's like social security acts and like the stuff he did with like the GI
Radical stuff.
I will say this: social programs from the 30s to the 50s is kind of what made America great for as long as it was, because they were able to sustain their strong middle class, but also keep like their economy intact.
Yeah, exactly.
And now that illusion's fading because of boomer policies, I'm actually wondering within all the healthcare stuff, do you have any plans on like making this idea more modernized? Do you have any plan of like allowing disability programs to be covered, alternative medicine, like what there would be covered with this plan? Because I feel like those are issues too.
Yeah. So what would be covered by this plan is if your doctor prescribes it, it is covered by the plan. If between you and your doctor, one of the things I think is the most disgusting things happening right now in our healthcare system right now is that the government is trying to tell doctors and patients what kind of treatment they're allowed to have, right? I have life-saving care that I have from my doctor every day, right? It's no secret, I'm a trans woman. I have life-saving care. Hormone replacement therapy saved my life, but the government is trying to tell me and my doctor that that should be illegal. And I think that is as corrupt as it can get. We need to get the doctors and we need to get doctors and patients to make those decisions together. We need to get insurance companies out of these discussions, and we sure as heck need to get all politicians out of that, out of the doctor's room, right? I think that's one of the worst things we've done in this healthcare system. And one of the things that I struggle with the most is, a lot of times my friends on the other side of the aisle, they'll try to tell me they say all the time, we just want you to have freedom. We want you to have the right to make your own decisions, right? The right to have alternative health care. But we're going to tell your doctor what they can and can't do. We have got to stop politicians from dictating what doctors can do. If a doctor's prescribed it, you should be afforded the right to have that treatment. And so that's the system we need to modernize, is we actually need to get the government out of healthcare decisions when it comes between you and your doctor.
I feel like, especially with all of like the gender debates and all this other stuff throughout politics, it's definitely become a very polarizing issue,
Yeah.
especially within the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like we need to be like, there needs to be more of a nonpartisan standing when it comes to talking about these things,
Yeah.
maybe even bipartisan, because it comes to the point where it's like, how much is too much when you're arguing something like this, and like, what's the cost? Like, is it going to be impossible to work with people in like 100 years?
Exactly. And some of the rhetoric we hear around certain types of healthcare needs that people have, right? What we forgot to do is actually ask the people who have received that care and ask them how it has impacted their lives, right? And so I know for me, it is my healthcare has been the greatest life-saving intervention that a doctor could have helped me get in my life, right? And so that's what we need to trust the physician and the patient to make decision for what's best for them.
And I do feel like throughout the last couple of years, like doctors tend to push a bunch of medications. Like even for disabilities like mine, they'll push a bunch of medication and not really think about side effects or brain effects or any of that stuff. So I'm almost wondering, like, because I don't know how relevant this is, but have you thought about safety protocols for stuff like that?
Oh yeah. Well, this is why a single-payer healthcare program would be very useful and helpful for you, right? For someone who fears a doctor is pushing a medication, the reality is that many physicians in the past, we look at our opioid crisis that we've had. We had so many pharmaceutical companies working with doctors directly to say, prescribe this, prescribe this, prescribe this. It's a profit-based business, right? If we pass a single-payer healthcare, there is no longer an incentive by doctors and by these pharmaceutical companies to profit off of it. It becomes, what does the patient need? And this is a program that's overseen by the state government, by a state health agency, right? We can see what's going on. Your health insurance company is going to be incentivized to what? Make money. But a single-payer healthcare program is incentivized to provide care, and we're going to make sure that the pharma lobbying does not exist within these systems, and that's why I think that the system is best to stop these types of crises and overprescriptions on many people.
This is another issue I kind of wanted to present on that topic as well. Is like there being so many medications now in circulation, and they're charging for all of them. Is there any contingencies to like make sure that big pharma lobbyists like that don't necessarily have control over like the price based on all of the medications, like just on that one and how much that one costs to like limit prices and make stuff a bit more affordable for people?
Yeah, exactly. Well, pharma lobbyists are going to get really bored when they only have one program to negotiate with, right? Because right now they have hundreds and thousands of programs and plans that they can negotiate. But if you have a single payer program like MiCare, you have one. And that they're allowed to set one price, and we, the state, say, here's the cap on that we will pay, right? And that negotiation gets much lower. And if we remove these pharmaceutical and healthcare companies from having the ability to also donate to campaigns and to candidates, we remove their incentive to do bad things in our systems and to elect people who are going to do their bidding instead of the patient's bidding. So we have to get money out of politics. We have got to get big corporations and healthcare systems and pharma out of our politics. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court made that a little bit harder for all of us in the last week.
I will say this. I'm going to move on with this.
Yeah.
You had mentioned you had wanted to support community policing programs between like people to like keep people safe. I'm curious how you want to go about that. Like, what is your vision of that?
Yeah, well, I point to some of the things that are going on in the city of Melvindale, which is part of the district that I'm running for right now. If you look back even a year and a half ago in the city of Melvindale, there were some major corruption issues going on in the police department. There multiple cases cited in the news about excessive force. In fact, one of these police officers just got charged and going to prison over excessive force issues, right? What we've done in this country and in this state is we've created a world where you've got certain communities that just do not trust the police, right? But what's happened in the city of Melvindale in the last year is they've gotten a new chief, Chief Egan, and they've done really, really strong work of partnering with the community and building stronger relationships with residents that generally used to mistrust the police, right? So instead of being really heavy-handed with kids in the community, you're doing more educational work. You're getting in the schools, you're going door to door, introducing yourself as the police chief, the officers that patrol the neighborhoods. These are the things the city of Melvindale has been doing, and they've been doing an amazing job. And literally within a year, we've seen massive improvements in the culture of that police department and also with how that community is interacting with the police, right? And it lowers the trauma that young people experience with the police. And I think that's something we have to do, especially in minority communities like Melvindale, who, on the border of Detroit, there's a lot of mistrust with police, especially with young communities of color. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see more trauma-informed training in our police departments. And I want to make sure that when we're funding our programs, our police programs, that we're funding these types of programs to make sure that they are trained properly to deal with certain situations without force.
I will ask this though, because I do feel like sometimes when stuff's been tied with the community, there's been like problems. Like back then, even with cities, it used to be like the mob and other stuff, and it gets really complicated in this way where it's almost like there's good intention, right? But stuff can go wrong. So I'm almost wondering, like, have you thought about contingencies with that?
Oh yeah, a current mob is all the corporations that are totally stealing our money and stealing our jobs right now. I would say that's the modern day mob that we're dealing with. I think we do need to get much more tough on corporate crime and corporate stealing of our wages. I think these are some of the things that we need to focus some of our efforts in law enforcement in to make sure that companies are adhering to laws in those ways. As far as contingencies when it comes to community policing, we've already got strong protocols in police departments, right? What you're doing with community police is you're adding a layer of care and trust to the community. And what you do is you try to rely on those programs first and those relationships before you have to go to the more heavy-handed programs. So the contingencies are there. What we're doing is we want to add more training and more trust with the community.
I'm asking if you have any idea of like what those would be, right? Because like everybody goes into like politics or something for like a vision. So I wonder what yours is on that.
On policing?
Yeah, like community like policing and like working with the community. Like what do you value in that? How do you want to get that done policy wise?
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I think we need to, again, I think we need to properly fund our programs and make sure that the funding that we're directing to our police departments is for the purposes I was talking about. Training, building community trust programs, things like that, funding non-lethal means of intervention, right? Because I think we look at what happened in the city of Southgate this week. We have a lot of questions about why was a shoplifter shot and killed? You know, what happened? Why did it escalate to that level? I want to see if we're spending and putting money into our police departments. I want to make sure that we're funding non-lethal means, because at the end of the day, we want to stop crime. We don't want to end life. And I think that those are the things that I would direct policy-wise to say, if we're going to be directing police funding, we're going to make sure that we're properly sending that money to training and non-lethal means of intervention.
I do want to ask this though about like intervention programs too, because I know that was on your list of policies. Yeah. I'm very curious because I feel like a lot of stuff like that, like it's very bureaucratic, it's very slow, it's very complicated. There's a lot of like children that go through a lot and that escalates into more trauma, and there's all this other stuff that happens. So I'm like, I know it's like it can be a harder thing to avoid considering it is like a hectic situation, especially like when intervention programs need to be put in place for specific like causes.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering like, has that been taken into consideration?
Yeah, we need to say police have a really difficult job, and I'm thankful for the work that they do, right? These officers, these police departments, they run into some of the most difficult situations. I understand running into the difficult situations, right? But I want to make sure that our police departments, one, that they feel supported by those of us in Lansing and by those of us in leadership to make sure that they have the resources and that they feel equipped for the job. How many of our police officers are we asking to be social workers instead of just funding social workers to be in their programs, right? These are the things. I want to make sure that they feel equipped for the job at hand. We have people that are having mental health breakdowns. We should not be expecting our police departments, our police officers to be therapists. We need to properly train them and equip them and make sure that our police departments have access to CCBHC programs to make sure that they have therapists and social workers on hand ready to respond at any time, right? These are the things I want to make sure that we're responding rather than just saying, here, we're going to give you weapons of war. Instead, I would rather providing you weapons of war, I want to provide you people who are trained for the moment. And so these are the things that I am going to be focused on when I get to Lansing.
That is good. I mean, I'm happy you have somewhat of an idea of like what your issues are on this. I think that's good that you can understand those things. I will say this though. Your equal access programs is the next thing I want to go into. Now, equal access is definitely a harder thing, especially like I'll name some examples. Like we have George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind Act, where they tried to like do all this standardized testing and like it ended up becoming this whole thing about race and demography, and it was this whole mess. And then they had to re-sync it with another act, and we even have programs like that FDR passed to like do stuff with non-discriminatory practices and like allow for people to have businesses. But then later in 1942, he passed Executive Order 9066, which was just we're going to put Japanese in internment camps and you can't say anything about it. But I feel like, because like when we talk about equal opportunities for stuff, like even for jobs and housing, like we can even go back to FDR here, where like he hired all these people to work on the Hoover Dam, but like even in the agricultural industry, right, he didn't really hire many African Americans, and they were left out of opportunity too. So there's a lot of interesting things. I'm interested in the modern day with like the changing polarization, changing political climate,
Yeah.
changing gender and social roles,
Yeah.
and like the new adaptations to environment. How, like, what your vision is for those things.
Yeah, there's been no more polarizing issue than our federal government trying to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our country, even here in our state. Let's think about this for a minute. We're trying to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in this state. Because if you take those programs away, the statistics are clear that minority groups do get left behind in these opportunities. And so I'm going to make sure. Prime example. Here's a prime example. I've had this odd experience in my life of getting to experience the world on both ends of the gender spectrum. Okay. When I was living my life as an out male, it was very easy for me to get jobs, for me to, I would interview for a job and I would get the job, and it would be a good paying job. Point blank example was I worked for one company before I came out and transitioned. I worked for the same company afterwards, and I made less money. And I had to call in a favor to get this job because I interviewed for hundreds of jobs. It's so hard in some parts of the world, and it's certain demographics. Women are getting paid less than men, right? Look at generational wealth of African American people. It is so difficult to get ahead in some demographics in our culture, and we just need to make sure that we are protecting equal access for all people in our country. And I think one of the things we're missing in this is when you create a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and when you uplift those programs, you are not taking a part of the pie away from someone else. What you're doing is you're giving opportunity to someone who would not have otherwise had that opportunity. And so at every turn, I'm going to support these programs in our state, and I'm going to be a loud squeaky wheel if I ever see that someone's trying to stop these types of programs in our state.
I will say this though. I do feel like with the housing thing, we've had stuff like the GI Bill made stuff more affordable for Americans, like back in the day. There's other programs relating to that. But I kind of have a question of like, with all of this stuff going on, like, especially with housing, how do you want to like go about making sure that like housing is an equal opportunity? Because right now the boomers control most of the housing market right now. Houses are over 300,000 right now because of rapid inflation. Don't even get me started on the oil crisis, even though we're self-sustainable. It's kind of nuts, honestly, to see all this stuff happen and people not really take much action on it. So I'm just curious how you would want to go about that. It's interesting.
That's a difficult thing right now, is that the median income in our country right now, you have to make 7 times, down payments are almost 7 times your salary to buy a house now, right? Back when my parents bought a house, that was a minute percentage, right? And if you look at housing trends right now, more people my age, your age, their parents are buying their homes and their kids are paying them rent for it because our generation cannot afford. And this all gets back to corporate behavior. We're all trying to get jobs in the workplace, and these jobs are not paying us enough, one, to live in this world right now. And the opportunities to get meaningful work that pays you well is becoming less and less as CEOs and big corporations consolidate, and there's less for the working public, right? So, a couple things I want to do. I want to make sure here in our community, we've got to do something about corporations who buy up homes and rent them and jack up the prices on our markets. We have to do something about it. And I think this is a bipartisan thing that Republicans and Democrats across the aisle all agree on. We've got to get corporations out of the home market, and we've got to get families and young people to be able to buy homes. I think that's one thing. We've got to help. We also need to help with down payment assistance. We've got to find a way to help young people get into their first homes, because right now you got $100,000 laying around. I don't. Like, that's what it's going to cost you for a down payment for a home right now. So we are locked out of that. And then on top of that, the rental market is even worse, right? The rental market is terrible. First, last, and your first child and your dog's left leg to get into a rental now, and then that fee is $2,500 for one bedroom. It's insane. I lived in an apartment before I moved into my house in Lincoln Park, and the rent went up 3 times in 2 years. And I got priced. I had to move across the street to another apartment in the same complex, and then that went up and I couldn't live there anymore, right? This is the reality we're dealing with because our companies are not paying us what to live. They're not, companies are really risk averse right now because of the volatile economy, and the housing market is just running out of control.
I would like to go more on like the housing market here too, because I feel like it's very important. I feel like when we talk about housing costs, I feel like it's important like to make them accessible. They have to like what you're saying, like family oriented is not a bad idea. I mean, the whole idea of the American dream used to be that families owned homes, not corporations. So I understand where that comes from for sure. But I'm also very curious of like, what would you define as a reasonable price in this economy for a home?
Great question. I mean, I don't know if I could give you a specific number, right? But the fact that a house costs 7 times my salary, my yearly salary, is just insane, and it's not sustainable. So we're just in an unsustainable pace right now when it goes to wage growth and the housing market growth and what houses cost right now. I mean, I would like to see homes get back into the affordability range that even our parents, were able to afford. 2 times their salary, whatever. I'm not going to give you a specific number, classic politician, right? But because it's impossible to say what is a perfect number. But somebody who's making $40,000 a year, $1,500, $2,500 a month mortgage payment is impossible. It is impossible, especially if you have children. I'm a parent of 3, and to try and keep up with my mortgage, to keep up with feeding my children and making sure that they have a good life, it's more and more expensive, and more of us are draining our bank accounts to make it, and it's just not fair. It's not fair when Elon Musk is the world's first multi-trillionaire, and I have to choose which bill to pay. It's just not fair.
I will say this. I feel like wages definitely need to adjust with like the minimum wage job market. Like they should adjust to that because they did used to be like that a long time ago, but they're not.
Yeah.
And they haven't been since like what, the early 2000s?
Yeah, pretty much right when I got out of high school, wages started flattening, and I think and so here's what I'm trained in, right? I went to seminary. I'm trained to find the root problems and to act on root problems. It can be really easy. Politicians like to just sometimes go after the gut reaction problem, the fruit on the tree. I actually want to get into the roots and figure out what's the problem here.
Like systematically.
What's the systematic problems? The reason I wanted to get into politics in the first place, because I saw the systematic problems. What we have right now is that companies, corporations, our employers have forgotten that they exist to create a public good. We have forgotten in the healthcare system that we're there to take care of patients. I've listened to many of those corporate board meetings, and you know what they're about? They're about our stock price. They're about our ROI, return on investments. We've forgotten about serving our people. We've forgotten about caring for those we work for. Gone are the days where corporations used to want to be the place where somebody would spend their entire career. All these corporations used to say, how can we keep these people? But now what do companies think? They think somebody quits, don't replace the job. let's get rid of jobs. Let's see how many heads we can cut from the payroll. That's what corporations are trying to do now because they're trying to get the higher profit margins for their stock prices. And that's the root problem. We have forgotten what public good is in this country and in this state. And I simply want to create policy that corporations are going to do what corporations do. They're going to try to make profit. So what we need to do is we need to make the game fair. And the government, I disagreed with you about government as a business. Government needs to remember that it is for the people to serve people. It is not a business. And I think that's what I want to remind our government and as an elected official to be, right? I want to help remind the businesses of our state why they exist in the first place.
I feel like often businesses do also become intertwined with the government and like pay people off, and there's other stuff there too. Lobbyists, you mentioned lobbyists,
yeah.
Which I do think that is a problem where they will just lobby money to get different things done for them.
They're having a hard time getting a meeting with me, just for the record.
And that's often like where a good amount of corruption comes from, and even like other sects of the government, I feel like. And it depends. Like there's people all around who want to actually get stuff solved, but like there's all this resistance from both sides.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like super hard. And that's kind of where like we draw a line in the sand of like, okay, like what's going on here and what can we do to fix it? So this is good that we're seeing some thought about housing initiative and that adjusting those with like minimum wage is a thought that's in like politicians' heads right now.
Yeah, and minimum wage is going up in 2027 to $15 in the state of Michigan, and it's still not enough. $15, you can't live on that. It's hard to even live on $20 an hour right now, right? And so we've got to really think about long-term solutions of how we navigate minimum wage and making sure that people, if you're working for a corporation who is posting huge profits, you better not have people on a government assistance program because you better be paying them well, right? So these are the realities that we've got to fix in our society right now.
I mean, and I will go back to this. I do feel like COVID did hyperinflate a lot of these problems because we ended up playing a lot to unemployed people, which I think it's a nice thing that they did do that. Don't get me wrong, because people needed it. But I do think there was an over influx of money and other stuff happened, and we're kind of recovering from this, as we do in every single economic crisis ever.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see how we can adjust wages and how we can adjust housing costs and all of these other costs. I think that's going to be an interesting issue to tackle within the next 10 years for sure.
Yeah, and we have to have a vision for 10 years, but I do think we need to start electing people who can have a vision for 100 years. And that's my hope. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get into this in the first place. I think we actually have too many politicians worried about 2 years and what can I do to get elected again? If I get elected once for a 2-year term, but the things I do in that 2-year term can set us up for the next 100 years in our state, if I can contribute to things that will create a betterment of the people for 100 years in the state of Michigan, I don't give a damn if I get elected again. Sorry, you might have to put the explicit on your podcast, but I think that we've lost that. 10 years is great, but we need to start building policy that lasts for 100 years. And that is a betterment for the people of the state of Michigan.
I mean, yeah, that's originally what the New Deal was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But that's become a whole rabbit hole over the past 105 years or so. So I mean, it'll definitely be interesting. I do wonder if you share this opinion, and I'm kind of curious. Do you feel like because of how old politicians are, they don't really connect with the issues of younger people?
Yes.
And do you think we need to start electing younger people into office?
Yes, 100%. I think it is wrong when people get into a seat, and that's the thing, at the state level, we don't have this problem because we have term limits, right? We do have term limits at the state level, so we do not have people getting elected and decomposing in their seat, right? I think that that's a problem. And also what happens is when you're in the same elected position forever and ever and ever, you become very disillusioned with what's going on in reality, right? So I do think we need to elect younger people. I'm in a race right now where that decision is in front of us. I am a first-time politician. This is my first race ever in politics, and I think that this mess we find ourselves in right now it's time for new. It's time for younger. I think it's time for all of us to lead. I think many of the generations before us prayed for our generation to be ready to lead, and I think we're ready. And I think we're ready. We're knocking the door saying it's time. We are at the precipice of where change needs to happen in this country and in this state. So it's time to elect new young leaders, and it's time for people. It's kind of like those old rock bands that it's like, really, they're touring again. Like, what about some other band that we didn't get to hear that had great songs, right? It's the same thing in politics. There's a lot of great young leaders in our state who aren't getting the opportunity, and in our country aren't getting the opportunity because somebody with name recognition just holds that seat forever.
John F. Kennedy always believed in this idea of the torch being passed to a new generation of Americans, and I feel like during like Vietnam and all that, that was really valued, especially in like the hippies and like the counterculture movement.
Yeah.
And I feel like from the 70s and like into the 80s, because like there was a huge like Reaganistic movement that happened. There was stuff that happened with the Cold War. Tensions were more kind of heightened, and then they died down with glasnost. There's all these things that ended up happening, but it's interesting to me that like we as a country, just from one event, can become so unfocused for the next 4 decades.
Yeah.
So I almost wonder, right, like, do you want more of like a Vietnamistic approach where like young people actively participate in like their schools or like in other stuff and actively voice their concerns? Or do you want more of a thing where like they're allowed to take place in political policy younger, like we could say the Roman or Greek Senate? Like where do you fall there, I guess?
Well, I'll go back to where I came from in my career. One of the things I'll credit my career path and where I came from with is that they knew how to train up their bench. They knew how to train up the next leader. I, as a leader, was trained from day one of my pastoral leadership back in the day that when I take the job on day one, I already better be thinking about who's going to take it after me. And I think that that's something that we have to start thinking through. It may not be one person, but you may have people on your list that you think, these are the future leaders, and that leader needs to be investing in the next generation of leaders. I think it's imperative that we have elected officials who have that type of vision to say, hey, here in Allen Park and Lincoln Park and Melvindale and Southgate, I've always got my eyes open for who could take my job next. And I think that's a good thing. And that's the type of leader I want to be as an elected official. And I hope that can become something infectious that goes all throughout politics. Because a lot of politics right now is just vying for your own position rather than wanting to serve the people of your community and just wanting to hold a seat rather than use that seat to care for others. And so that's my vision. It's probably neither of the things you're talking about, but I want to be a leader, and I want to see the Democratic Party be really good at building its bench.
And that's again why I created this podcast, to hear multiple people's views, Republican, Democrat, Independent, all these people who have unique stories. I like to put them on so I can see differing views.
And the interesting
thing, to record it so that it's not forgotten, so that people don't forget.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, I think part of my political story, some of your listeners are probably, okay, wait a minute. Evangelical pastor, now you're a Democrat. Like, when you hear that first part of my life story, I was very much in right-wing politics because that's what you had to be in my career field. You had to be. I actually worked in a church that told me you couldn't be a Democrat and a Christian. And
that's not true.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so like I was very much versed in the world of Republican Christian politics. So one thing I will say about that side of the aisle that I do not subscribe to at this point in my life is that they were very organized and they were very good at raising up their bench. And I think it's something that we can learn from one another and understand that we're all Americans and we all have good ideas and we can learn from each other and how to do better.
Like I will say this, like throughout history, like Christianity, like it's good. Okay.
Cool.
All right, perfect. So like throughout time, right, like Christianity's had this thing where there's like moral structure with it, like it has good moral structure, but a lot of it got altered by the clergy, and a lot of it got altered by Catholic officials, and all this stuff started getting confused. And even now we see interpretations of that become more nuanced. And like again, like you can be whatever and be a Christian. Like Christianity is supposed to be you read it and you understand it, I would say in your own way. But you still have those principles. That's just my view on that, though, or like any religion, really.
Yeah, and you know, my faith, and it's my faith, I need that to be heard, right? I think sometimes, you know, I say this all the time, the Republican Party does not own Christianity. And really when the whole Jerry Falwell and Ronald Reagan partnership began, you know, the moral majority began to kind of appropriate Christianity to the Republican Party. I think that was one of the biggest disservice that happened to America, and I think it's one of the biggest disservices that happened to the faith, Christianity. And for me, my hope is to help people understand that there is more than one interpretation of this faith. And one thing I'll be really clear about as an elected official is that we will never use anyone's faith system to create law. And I think that's where we've gone morally bankrupt in this country, is when we tried to marry a religion and a party. I think that's where we've gone deeply wrong in this nation.
Like, and that's what, like, some of the like beliefs of like loving people as you love yourself, like those are good.
Simple.
Those are
It's a
good
simple thing to do.
beliefs, right? And it's good beliefs to like understand faith over law, like in Corinthians. But also, like, I feel that oftentimes, like, we forget that it's more of a moral-based thing, and back when governments had it, it was just a moral-based thing, even if it was used by corrupt people.
Yeah, I mean, when Rome made Christianity the state-sponsored religion, this was a terrible time for many in the Roman Empire, and I would argue that we have fallen into the same trap of America becoming that empire. And my hope is to create a hopeful vision for the future, to say, look, America is a pluralistic society, that you are free to have your religion, but you're also free to be apart from religion. And as long as you're pursuing your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and it's harming no one else, you're free to do that in this country, and I'll defend that till the day I die.
Sure. I'm really curious of like how what are your experiences like in politics, and how have those helped you become the person you see yourself as today?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I said, at the age of 17, I started leading in some of America's biggest churches. Started right here in the state of Michigan. I ended up working at the biggest church in America, which is called Life Church in Oklahoma City, about 100,000 people, over 45 locations. So what that experience gave me, now listen, very ideologically different from what I'm doing now, but the experience and getting the reps of working with leaders across the country to serve a group of people who had an existential crisis, and creating programs for that 100,000 people to meet their needs was what I got experience in doing. And that translates really clearly into politics today. You're working with people across the state for millions of people, but here in the state of Michigan, for 90 to 100,000 people. That translates very clearly, and I have experience in leadership in those types of settings. But even in my current role, working as a clinical chaplain who works in I'm a non-denominational chaplain now. Like, I work with all faith systems, but I work in some of life's most intense moments. and you have to remain the calmest person in the room. And politics is sometimes a blood sport. And my goal, and what that has taught me, is how to be the calmest person in the room, even when something is happening and it doesn't seem fair. And I think that experience and being able to stay calm in the middle of that is going to be my biggest asset as a state legislator, because I faced down many of our residents' worst days with them and walked with them through that. And I think that that's what I'm going to bring to my political leadership. And what I started doing after I got out of the pastoral world and started working in hospitals, I started advocating for LGBTQ people within religion. And that's what snowballed into politics for me. I started going across the state and advocating for people to have access to their faith systems. And for me, being a huge civil rights advocate across the state of Michigan is a big part of why this moment makes sense, because we have a government that tries to stamp out people's civil rights across the state. And so for me, I think that we can elect leaders with experience, right? We can elect leaders with political experience. We have to elect people with experience for the moment. And I think at this moment where we are right now in this country and in this state, I think that my experience is the unique experience we need right now. And so that's why I'm looking forward to serving this community and going to Lansing and doing exactly that. What I've done my whole career is fighting for people's rights to exist in the world and finding the root causes of things and building the programs with leaders across the state to solve those problems.
All right, no, that is awesome. I hope that you find like more about yourself and that you grow on this journey to do what you are going to do, and I'm glad for that. It's nice for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Sure, it's nice. It's been nice having you on there. All right. Yep.
Great.